The dress still had wine on it. I didn't throw it away. I folded it and put it in a garbage bag and shoved it to the back of my closet, and every time I opened that door I could smell it, that sharp, sour smell of Sauvignon Blanc and humiliation. My sister's drink of choice. Which I guess makes sense, because humiliation was her love language. I'm getting ahead of myself. My name doesn't matter as much as what happened. What matters is that I was 31 years old, standing in the parking lot of the Magnolia Grand Hotel, mascara running down my face, wine soaked into the collar of a dress I'd bought specifically because my sister said I looked matronly in everything I owned. I'd spent $400 trying to prove her wrong, and she dumped her glass on me from behind in front of 112 people, while the DJ played something with too much bass, and my mother, turned back to her conversation like she hadn't seen a thing. I called my friend Petra from that parking lot. I didn't know who else to call. She picked up on the second ring. It was 11:15 at night. "Where are you?" she said. I told her. She said, "Don't drive." "I'm coming." I sat on a concrete parking barrier and waited, and I thought about how I'd gotten there. Not to that parking lot specifically. To that point in my life where my own family could do something like that, and no one, not one person in that ballroom, said a word. Here's what you need to understand about my sister Tara. Tara is 4 years older than me. She is the kind of woman who walks into a room and immediately becomes the gravitational center of it. She's not the most beautiful person in the room, or the smartest. But she has this quality. I've never found a word for it. Where she makes you feel like her attention is a gift. Like if she turns toward you and smiles, you've passed some invisible test. I failed that test my whole life. Growing up, Tara was everything. She was the one who got the good grades and then stopped caring about grades, and somehow that was also cool. She was the one who cried at the right moments and laughed at the right moments, and always knew what the right moment was. And I was the one who read too much, spoke too quietly, wore the wrong shoes to the 8th grade dance. My mother worshipped her. That's not an exaggeration. My mother. I'll call her what she is because she lost the right to a title. Worship Tara in the way that some people worship a version of themselves they never got to be. Tara was who she wanted to be at 25. Fearless, wanted, never in the wrong room. I was a reminder of everything else. I don't say this looking for pity. I say this because it's the context. It's the foundation. Everything else was built on. When you grow up understanding that your value in your family is conditional, you learn to make yourself small. You learn to be grateful for the crumbs. You learn to call cruelty by softer names. She didn't mean it like that. She's just blunt. That's just how she shows love. I called it love for a long time. I was 24 when I got the job at Callaway Financial. It was a real job, not the kind you take because you need rent money, but the kind that comes with a career ladder and a 401k and a business card that has your name and your title and the company logo in embossed ink. I was a financial analyst. I was good at it. Numbers made sense to me in a way that people often didn't, and I was precise and thorough, and my manager, a woman named Deborah, told me after my first year that I had uncommon instincts. I made the mistake of telling my mother that. 2 days later, Tara called me and said she'd heard I was being a little braggy about work stuff, and that people found it off-putting. People. As if she had polling data. I told Mom about a compliment my boss gave me. I said, "You know how you can get," she said. "I didn't ask how I could get," she said. "I didn't ask how I could get. I already knew. I could get visible. I could get real. I could exist in a way that required acknowledgement. That was how I could get, and it had always been a problem. Here's what I didn't know at 24 and didn't learn until I was 31. Tara had been watching my career the way a hawk watches a field. Quietly. From above. I found out what she did in pieces, the way you find out about anything terrible. Not all at once, but in fragments that slowly arrange themselves into a picture you can't unsee. It started with a credit card alert. I had a notification set up on my accounts for any transaction over $500. Standard practice. I worked in finance. I was cautious about these things. One Thursday morning, I was in the middle of drafting a client report when my phone buzzed. A charge of $1140. A furniture store in Scottsdale, Arizona. I have never been to Scottsdale, Arizona. I called the card company. They confirmed the charge. They read me the last 4 digits of the card used. It matched mine. I said, I didn't make this purchase. They said they'd flag it and send me a form. I thought it was a random skimming incident. It happens. I filed the form, canceled the card, requested a new one, and moved on. 2 weeks later, another alert. This time, it was a charge of $3,000, a deposit on an apartment in Phoenix. Phoenix is 45 minutes from Scottsdale. I started making calls. I called the apartment complex, and after being transferred 3 times, a woman in their leasing office told me the application had been submitted online with my social security number, my employment verification from Callaway Financial, which I had not provided, and a copy of my driver's license. I sat very still in my car in the Callaway parking garage for about 4 minutes. Then I thought, who has all of those things? Who has seen my license, knows where I work, would know enough about my financial history to pull off a credit application? I thought about the box of documents my mother kept in her house, the box that had everyone's birth certificates, social security cards, copies of old tax returns. The box I hadn't thought about in years because I trusted that it was safe, because it was my mother's house, because family. I drove to my mother's house on a Saturday and asked to see the box. My mother got a look on her face. The look was familiar. It was the look she got when Tara had done something and my mother was deciding how much I was allowed to know. "Why do you need it?" she said. "Someone used my social security number to apply for an apartment," I said. "I need to see if my card is still in there." She said the box was in storage. That was a lie. The box was always in the hall closet. I'd seen it there 2 months earlier when I came over for dinner and knocked over the umbrella stand. I said, "Mom." She said, "I'm sure it's fine." I went home. I pulled my credit report that night, the full one, from all 3 bureaus. I made a cup of tea and sat at my kitchen table and scrolled through it, and by the time the tea was cold, I understood. There were 6 accounts I hadn't opened. A credit card, 2 store accounts, the apartment deposit in Phoenix, a car loan on a vehicle I had never seen or touched. And one more thing, a loan from a credit union in Mesa, Arizona, in the amount of $22,000. $22,000. I remember the number because I kept counting the digits. 2, 2, 0, 0, 0. Like if I looked long enough, it would change. I don't cry easily. It's not a point of pride. It's just the way I'm wired. When things get bad, I tend to go very quiet and very systematic. But sitting at that kitchen table, I felt something I don't have a clean word for. It wasn't just anger. It was grief. Because I knew, in the way that you know things before you can prove them, exactly who had done this. And knowing it meant acknowledging something about my family that I had spent years not quite letting myself acknowledge. I called Petra. "Are you okay?" she said. "No," I said. "I need a lawyer." She had a friend, not a friend exactly, more of an acquaintance from her graduate program, who had gone into financial fraud law. His name was Conrad. He wasn't cheap, but Petra vouched for him, and I made an appointment, and 3 days later I sat across from Conrad in his office and put a printed copy of my credit report on his desk. He looked at it for a long time. "Do you know who did this?" he said. "I have a very strong suspicion," I said. "Do you want to tell me?" I told him. Conrad's face did something careful and controlled. He'd heard worse, probably. He asked me several questions. When did I first notice? What documentation did I have? Had I filed police reports? Had I contacted the credit bureaus directly? I had done none of those things yet. He told me that was fine. That's what he was for. "If your suspicion is correct," he said, "and there are 6 accounts and a loan, you're looking at identity theft, wire fraud, possibly bank fraud, depending on how the loan was structured. This is federal territory." "Federal," I said. "She used your social security number," he said. "That alone crosses lines that state law doesn't cover well." I want to be honest about what I felt in that moment. I didn't feel relief. I didn't feel relief. I didn't feel release. I felt sick, because Tara was still my sister, and my mother was still my mother, and I was about to do something that couldn't be undone. Conrad walked me through the process. We'd file reports, FTC, local police, contact the fraud departments at each creditor. He'd handle most of the communication. The goal was to clear my credit and recover any financial damages. What happened to Tara as a result of those filings was, legally speaking, not my department. But it will happen, I said. If she did what you think she did, he said. Yes, it will happen. I said okay. I said let's do it. I need to tell you about the night I'm sure you've been waiting for. The event that I mentioned at the beginning. The parking lot, the wine, the dress. That was a month into the legal process. Conrad had filed the reports. The credit bureaus had been notified. Tara didn't know any of this yet. As far as she knew, I was still the quiet one who read too much and never made waves. My cousin Bryson was getting married. Destination wedding. Technically. Except the destination was just a very fancy hotel, 40 minutes from where a whole family lives, which I think defeats the purpose, but it wasn't my wedding. The Magnolia Grand. Nice place. Chandeliers, a terrace that looked out over a man-made lake, waitstaff who called everyone sir and mom. I almost didn't go. Conrad advised me to keep things normal. Don't tip off Tara, don't have confrontations, let the process work. Going to a family wedding was normal. So I bought the dress, the $400 one. I did my hair. I sat at a table near the back with my cousin's work friends, which was fine with me. I drank 2 glasses of water, 1 glass of wine, and I ate the salmon, which was actually very good. I watched Tara across the room being the center of everything, laughing with her head tilted back, touching people's arms, and I felt the way you feel when you look at something and understand it completely for the first time. Like a language you've been hearing your whole life and suddenly, finally, you speak it. She came over to my table around 9:30. She didn't sit down, she stood behind me. You look tired, she said. Did you do something different with your hair? I said I hadn't. She said, in that way that means the opposite of nothing. She left. I thought that was the end of it. At 10:50, I was standing near the dessert table talking to my cousin's new wife's aunt, a perfectly pleasant woman from Cincinnati who was telling me about her garden, when I heard someone step up close behind me. Too close. And then I felt cold all down my back and shoulders, and I heard the glass hit the floor. She poured it slowly. I realized later, thinking about it, she poured it slowly. Not a splash. A deliberate, controlled pour. She wanted me to feel every second of it. The woman from Cincinnati stopped talking. I turned around. Tara was looking at me with an expression I had never seen on her face before. Not anger. Not even contempt. Something that looked almost like satisfaction. Like she had been waiting for a moment that she'd planned carefully, and it had gone exactly as planned. Oops, she said. The DJ was playing something loud. People nearby had turned to look. I saw my mother across the room, and for one fraction of a second our eyes met. And then she turned away, back to her conversation. Her champagne glass. The centerpiece on her table. I picked up my clutch. I walked to the exit. I did not run. In the parking lot, I called Petra. I told you that part already. She came. She drove me home. She sat on my couch while I showered, and she made me eat half a sleeve of crackers because that's the kind of friend she is. I cried in the shower where she couldn't see, and then I came out in clean clothes, and we watched something neither of us paid attention to, and at 2 in the morning she went home. I didn't sleep. I lay in bed thinking about the look on Tara's face. The oops, the pouring, the slowness of it, and I thought, she thinks this is still the same game. She thinks I'm still the same person. She didn't know about Conrad. She didn't know about the reports, the credit bureau filings, the federal complaint that was already sitting in a system somewhere being processed by people who did not care about family dynamics or who was more charming at a wedding. She thought she'd won that night. 2 weeks after the wedding, Tara was contacted by investigators from the FTC and a detective from the Financial Crimes Unit of the County Sheriff's Office. Conrad told me it would happen around this time, but I still felt the phone ring and looked at the unknown number and let it go to voicemail. My mother called me that evening. "Do you know what's happening?" she said. There was something in her voice I'd never heard before. Not anger. Something closer to fear. "Yes," I said. A pause. "Tara says she didn't." "Mom," I said. "I have the credit reports. I have the accounts. I have the car loan on a car I've never seen. I have $22,000 in fraudulent debt in my name." She was quiet for a long time. "This is going to destroy her," she said. "What she did was going to destroy her," I said. "I just filed the paperwork." I hung up. I'm not going to pretend that conversation felt good. It didn't. There's a version of this story where I felt powerful and vindicated and like justice was a clean, bright thing. But the truth is that I sat on my kitchen floor after hanging up and stared at the refrigerator for a while. Because she was right, in a factual sense, this was going to change things. It was going to change them in a way that nothing would change back. Conrad kept me updated in careful, measured emails. The investigation moved faster than I expected. The car loan was the key. There was documentation, there were records of the vehicle, and Tara had actually been driving it. A silver Honda Accord registered under a loan in my name that I had never signed for. The investigators found evidence of the other accounts tied to her devices and her IP address. She had been careful, but not careful enough, the kind of careless that comes from years of getting away with things and starting to believe you always will. She was charged in early spring. Wire fraud, identity theft, bank fraud. Conrad walked me through each charge and what it meant, and I asked him what the likely outcome was, and he said that depended on a lot of factors, but that given the amount, the number of accounts, and the documented pattern, she was not looking at a fine and a warning. She lost her job before the charges were even public. Apparently her employer did a routine financial background check and found the fraud alerts attached to her own credit history, because in the process of opening fake accounts in my name, she'd tangled her own financial profile in ways that were hard to untangle. Conrad explained this to me once, and I understood it in a general sense, and mostly what I understood was, she had been this careful and this reckless at the same time. She had planned it enough to do it and not planned it enough to survive it. She was offered a plea, she took it. Probation, mandatory restitution, and a record that would follow her. The car was repossessed from her driveway. I was told about this secondhand by my cousin Bryson, who I think genuinely didn't know which side to be on, and so chose information sharing as neutral territory. My mother has not called me since that conversation on the phone. I think about that a lot, not with anger anymore, but with a kind of tired clarity. She chose a long time ago. It wasn't new information. What was new was that there were finally real stakes, real consequences, and she still looked the other way. That says something that I don't need to narrate. Petra came over the weekend after the plea was announced. She brought takeout from the Thai place I like, the one with the lemongrass soup that comes in containers that are always slightly too hot to hold. We sat on my balcony and ate in the October air and didn't talk about Tara much. Mostly we talked about Petra's new job and a book I'd been reading and whether we wanted to drive up to the mountains before it snowed. Normal things. I've thought about what I would say to someone who was in the position I was in. Before the credit report, before Conrad, before any of it, when I still thought the things being done to me were just the ambient unfairness of having the wrong family. I would say, go pull your credit report, right now, tonight. It's free, it takes 10 minutes, and you may find nothing. You probably will find nothing. But you should know what's there. I would also say, the people who look the other way are making a choice. It doesn't look like a choice. It looks like weakness, or conflict avoidance, or they just didn't see. But it is a choice. My mother made a choice every time she turned back to her champagne glass. Every time she said it's fine, it's Tara. She doesn't mean it like that. She meant it like that. And I would say maybe most importantly, you're not betraying someone by telling the truth about what they did. The betrayal already happened. You just weren't the one who did it. The dress is still in my closet. I keep meaning to donate it. It's a genuinely nice dress, wine stains and all, And there's probably someone at a thrift store who would love it and would never know anything about the night I wore it, or the parking lot, or Petra's headlights pulling in at 11:30. Maybe that's fine. Maybe that's the right ending for it. Someone else wearing it somewhere, not knowing its history, starting clean. I could use some of that myself, but I'm getting there. Slowly. The way everything real actually moves, not in a single dramatic moment, but in the accumulation of ordinary days where nothing terrible happens and you start, quietly, to remember who you were before you let someone convince you that you were less. I remember. I've thought about cause and effect a lot since everything happened, not in a cosmic sense. I don't think the universe was balancing a ledger on my behalf. I think it's simpler and less poetic than that. I think that what people do accumulates. Every choice stacks on top of the last one, and eventually the stack gets too tall and tips over, and whatever's underneath it gets buried. Tara made choices for years. Small ones at first, probably, the eye roll, the oops, the way she'd take credit in rooms where I wasn't present, then bigger ones, the documents, the accounts, the car loan in my name on a car she drove every day. Each choice made the next one easier, I think. That's how it works. You get away with something and the boundary of what's permissible shifts. Just slightly, just enough that the next thing feels survivable. Until one day, you're committing federal fraud against your own sister, and somewhere in your mind, it still feels like just another version of what you've always done. That's not a character flaw I was born immune to. I want to be honest about that. I have things I've let slide. Things I told myself were fine when they weren't. The difference, the only difference, is that at some point I started paying attention. I pulled the credit report, I made the appointment with Conrad. I sat with the discomfort of knowing something I didn't want to know and did the next right thing anyway. That's what I'd call intelligence if I were going to put a name to it. Not the kind that scores well on tests. The kind that notices. That looks at a pattern long enough to understand it. That doesn't mistake familiarity for safety, and the courage, if I'm being honest, what I had wasn't really courage in the dramatic sense. I wasn't fearless. I was terrified when I filed those reports. I was terrified when my mother called. I hung up the phone and sat on my kitchen floor and stared at the refrigerator. Courage, I think, is just doing the necessary thing while that feeling is present. Not after it goes away. While it's there, loud and uncomfortable, and you do it anyway. My mother made a choice too. She made it in that ballroom when she turned back to her champagne, and she made it on the phone when she said, "This is going to destroy her," meaning Tara, not me, never me. And she has continued making it every day she hasn't called. I used to want her to call. I don't think I do anymore. What would she say that would change what I know about who she is? What Petra gave me, on the other hand, was the clearest example I have of what real loyalty looks like. She came at 11:15 at night. She made me eat crackers. She didn't tell me what to do. She just stayed. That's the whole thing sometimes. Someone who stays. I'm not who I was before this happened. I'm quieter in some ways and louder in others. I check my credit report every quarter. I trust more slowly. I've stopped calling cruelty by softer names. These are not losses. They are the shape of a person who learned something real at a cost that was real and decided to keep going anyway. That's enough. That's actually more than enough.